Hello, my awesome artists. Today we are going to work with our how to draw a sandcastle drawing guide. I'm going to step you through how to do this and build your sandcastle. There's obviously lots of options and opportunities to add different things to make it more your own. When we are finished today, if you have watercolors available at home and maybe a simple round brush, painting this in would be a great way to add some color to it. But you can also just color it with regular crayons, markers, you can use colored pencils, anything you have available to you. Let's get started. First thing you want to do is draw a kind of gently waving, just not a straight line, on the bottom third of your page. Go from one side to the other, make sure it falls off of the page. That is going to be the bottom part where the sand is on your sandcastle. So our sandcastle is going to sit on top of this. So the next thing we're going to do is draw a horizontal line kind of in the middle of the page. Again, does not have to be perfect. It is a sandcastle. We're going to talk about foreground, middle ground, and background with this. The sand would be in your foreground. Same with the sandcastle. The middle ground will be the ocean behind it, and then the background will be whatever sky you draw. So from this horizontal line we just drew, we're going to make two slightly diagonal lines that come down to our sand. And you're going to do that on both sides. Once that is done, you want to come in just a little bit from the edge and draw a couple lines that go up. I may have made mine just a little bit too tall. Don't be afraid to erase and kind of adjust. We're gonna do our best here. I might have made these too angular as well, more straight up and down. And I'm just following this guide. I'm on step 2 right now. All right, so you can see that the next step is to add the bricks to the top of your sandcastle. And in order to do that, I need to make sure I leave enough space at the top of my page to do so. So I might even bring this line down a little bit so that I have enough room to add. And I'm just gonna go back and forth, making little horizontal and vertical lines. And that one went too far, so I can just kind of erase that off. If I wanted to and I didn't like the way that looked, I could just always extend this straight out so it comes straight back down, and then it's the same on the left and the right. The next step we are going to do on step 3 is add those same brick patterns that we just did here. Ooh, I messed this one up. Down on either side of our castle. So we're going to add those on either side. And I'm going to make these guys a little more straight. So it's just like making a square without the bottom part. So if I wanted to, I could make squares like this, and then just kind of cheat and erase either the top or the bottom, depending on which part it needed to be. If that makes more sense to you to do it that way, go for it. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just kind of guiding myself here so I know how big to make these. Turn my paper sideways just a smidge. And remember, while you're drawing along, if I'm going too fast, feel free to pause, rewind. Sometimes it's helpful to watch the whole video through once or twice and then start working. Okay, I think that's pretty good. It's definitely not the same on one side as it is the other, but that is totally fine. You can always go back and adjust if you feel the need to. All right, step 4. So we're going to add some lines that come down from the tops of the castle and a few upside down U shapes. So I'm just going to take this from here and draw straight down and do the same thing on that side. And then I'm just going to add some upside down U shapes to all of these sections so that there are entrances to my sandcastle. Because what's a castle if you can't get into it, right? All right. The next step is adding a few more details. First is in the background where the ocean water would be. Remember, this is just our sand that we're building our castle on. So imagine you're sitting right in front of it. So we're going to come up to about halfway to in the middle of our sandcastle and draw another line. And it also helps if you just kind of drag your pencil across your paper without touching it and then draw the other line on the other side. That way it kind of comes out even. We're going to add some details here to make it look like the entrances are open to our sandcastle and then it's three-dimensional by adding an extra line on the inside only from the curve down, so almost like a candy cane shape. Then we can add flags. You can do those wherever and however you would like. You can add simple flags. You can make them wavy like this by just curving the line and then making sure that the bottom line curves as well. If you want maybe to do longer flags on the top of your castle, remember they would all be blowing the same direction. So if they're waving to the right, they all need to go that way because the wind would not blow them in two different directions. So there's that. And then I'm going to do one more, try and get the height about the same here. And that's not really important. The important part is that you understand foreground, middle ground, and background with this project. So if everything is not perfect, lined up and centered and all of that, that is not our main goal with this. So the next few steps are kind of where you get to throw in a little more of your own personality. Adding a sunset in the background or a sunrise. I'm going to make my sun really big and put it right there, like it's setting behind my sandcastle. And maybe even add a couple of birds flying over here, which are just a couple of little curves, maybe a third. So this is my background. Anything that happens behind the sandcastle, okay? Then in my foreground, I could add something like a shovel. So if I just make a U shape and close it off, and then make another shape exactly like that on the inside, that could be the handle. That could be the scoop part that comes off of it. There you have a shovel. If you want to make it look more 3D, you can just add in those lines, kind of help us understand where the inside of the shovel is versus the outside. You can draw a starfish. I am not very good at making stars without drawing all the lines, so I'm just going to draw lightly. And then erase the inside lines to make it look more like a starfish. Or maybe it's just one of those cutouts that you use to stamp into the sand and whatnot. Lastly, you could always add some seashells. I didn't make that line go the right way. So start out with a sort of boxy U shape that comes in and then make a curve around the top. Almost looks like a snow globe. And then add in the detail lines. Once you have that, you basically have a seashell. Now, if you wanted to go and make your sandcastle more detailed, maybe it has different size towers, maybe the big tower's on the outside, the smaller one is on the inside, that is totally fine. What I am looking for in this project is that you have a foreground where the sand and maybe your tools and some identifying objects that let us know that this is what you were using to build your sandcastle. The middle ground, this is where the water would be. You could even add some water-like ripples if you would like. I wouldn't go overboard with those, just doing a few to suggest that there's water back there is plenty. And then the background where you have the sky, you can have clouds, birds, a sun, those sorts of things. Obviously, we have to see a sandcastle also kind of in that foreground, middle ground space so that I can see the depth that you are creating on this two-dimensional surface. I hope that you have fun with this project. I'm going to put the rest of this kind of in fast forward as I trace over the entire sandcastle. Again, you can either use a Sharpie or a black crayon. They both work excellent. You can color it in with whatever you have available. If it's colored pencils, crayons, markers, or watercolor, all of it will work just fine. The whole entire page should be colored completely, and do your best with the color options that you have. Sandcastles are usually kind of a tan color, so I might come back and show you how to mix that with watercolor. Have fun, guys. Okay, just a quick reminder as we are finishing tracing is if you don't want to see your pencil lines, it's a good idea to take the time to erase those now. If you have a big eraser, that usually works the best. But if you only have the eraser on the end of your pencil, that will work fine too. I would just kind of get rid of anything maybe you decided to change as you were working, especially those big lines. Like I drew really dark up there, so I definitely want to get rid of those. But some of these lines, like you see in the water that I didn't trace perfectly, or even right here in these arches, don't really matter, and you won't be able to see them all that well once you color it all in anyway. So it's up to you if you choose to erase a lot or just kind of leave it where it is. If you have a big eraser, white or a pink pearl eraser, those are excellent for erasing big areas and kind of getting it done quickly. Sorry, I think I'm shaking the whole table doing this. It's just like being at school. The whole table shakes when I erase things. So once I have this cleaned up, I do want to remind you that if you are using crayon, erasing after you're using crayon is not a good idea because it will smear everywhere. But if you're using a permanent marker, and I will say this again, it should be a permanent marker if you are adding watercolor. If you want to use a Crayola marker, that is fine. Do not add watercolor over top of it or it will bleed everywhere. If you're using a Sharpie, you can use watercolor over top of it. And if you're using crayon, you can use watercolor over top of it. I do not have my crayons handy. Yes, I do. You could also decide that you want to color in maybe parts of your sky with crayon and then add watercolor over top of it. So I'm going to show you kind of how to do more of a mixed media project. I'm going to turn this slightly sideways. So if you just lightly color and maybe even add some dark areas, you can get the illusion of clouds in your sky. Even while we're working on that background there, you can then go ahead and add some blue over top of it. I'm just going to do this really quickly so that you guys can see what it's like. And I'm going to use this big brush because I have a big space in that sky to work with. Getting some water into my watercolor here. And then all I would do is just brush over top of it So if we were using crayon on this whole project, you will notice that the watercolor does not stick where there is, I'm gonna carefully go around my flag, any crayon, because it resists. Crayon is made of wax, and so water and wax do not mix. So I have to be really careful with this, and it might take me a little while to get this done because I have a big brush here. And I need to go slowly so that I don't get it in places that I don't want. The other thing when you're working with watercolor is if this is still wet and I started to paint my castle, my blue might blend into my castle color. And if you don't want that to happen, then you definitely need to pay attention to waiting until the sky is dry before you move on. There you have it, your completed sandcastle. I hope you had fun. I hope that it was a creative way for you to spend some time and experiment with color and drawing and learned about foreground, middle ground, and background. I can't wait to see what you've created. Have a wonderful day.